Thank you so much, Rohan. That was great. Very heartfelt, and especially being here in New York City, like you really saw the small businesses shuttered, closed down. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you to all those corporations who partnered. And yeah, just another example of the good work that John and his team are doing. So, all right, let's keep it moving. It is my pleasure to introduce to our final panel as our panelists make their way to the stage. And our moderator, you can walk right in front of me, no problem. So this panel is Cultivating and Supporting a New Generation of Asian American Leaders. So moving it forward. Jyoti, okay, yes, as the Chief People, Inclusion, and Sustainability Officer, MGM, Jyoti is responsible for leading human resources and social impact and sustainability. She oversees environmental, social, and governance reporting and is responsible for directing enterprise-wide human and social capital initiatives and serves as liaison to the Board of Directors Corporate Social Responsibility Committee. And there is more, but I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Terrific. Let me begin, first of all, by just saying, firstly, congratulations, John, to you and the team at the Asian American Business Development Center for 20 years of stewardship in an unprecedented way and environment for really heralding Asian American Pacific Islanders and creating this incredible platform to shine a spotlight on Asian talent in a way that we've never had before. And so congratulations to you and the team on this auspicious occasion of your 20th anniversary. It really is a remarkable milestone, and I know, I'm sure my colleagues here on the stage and all of you in the audience join me in just congratulating John and the team. So we're here this afternoon as the wrap-up to really talk about this topic of cultivating and supporting a new generation of Asian American leaders. And we have a fantastic panel that I'll introduce in a moment. But I want to begin by setting some context around the discussion that we're going to have. And please be thinking about questions, comments, feedback, insights. I will pause halfway through. We've got mics either end of the foot of the stage. I encourage you to come up and just talk, and it doesn't have to be a question, but just share your feedback and your insights and what's top of mind for you so that we make this an interactive dialogue. But what we've seen in the recent past have been a myriad of things, and in a way, it's a coalescing and a convergence of some pretty significant forces. You have generational shifts. We have, for the first time in history, 4 generations in the workforce. We've had the disruption of technology that's resulted in massive dislocation and a complete rethinking and reshaping of the world of work and the workforce and ways of working. Layer onto that issues around social justice. And we saw from Rohan's presentation just now the impact that has had on the Asian American community. Disruption of business impact. We've had the hate crimes and the hate issues that have surfaced in a way that we've never seen before. It's resulted in a shifting of attitudes and behaviors. And there's a lot of contemplation and reflection around what does the rest of life during the pandemic and thereafter look like. And so the question on the table for us to discuss is, what does this mean for the generation that is right behind us and hopefully following in our footsteps? So some of the themes that we're planning to explore in our conversation over the next hour are really going to look at things like leadership and gravitas. You know, what is it? How do you cultivate it? How do you earn it? What does it actually mean? How do you put it into practice? Understanding the role of sponsorship and the significance of mentorship, and how that parlays into, far more than just being hardworking or being in the office for X number of hours or working 7 days a week. But really, what does it take to ascend into the ranks of leadership? How do you build talent across the AAPI community for upward mobility? What are those pathways? How do you curate them, create them, pull talent forward through pathways? And then the notion of cultural upbringing and challenges of our community. We are all products of our environment, our upbringing, and we're all cognizant of the fact that our Asian cultural heritage, our roots, our families, the generations that we've emanated from, bear a tremendous impact in shaping us and our attitudes and our behaviors. And this notion of, and it was something that came up in a discussion that we all had, how that has infected and shaped us, and how do you separate sort of the home life, the growing up with an Asian grandparent in your household, and then translate that to sort of life in corporate America and how you behave and interact. So we're going to explore that. These are just some of the themes that we're going to touch on. We want to hear, obviously, from all of you as well. But hopefully that provides a little bit of context. And so let me just take a moment to introduce my esteemed colleagues. I'll just tell you a little bit about them, but then I'm going to ask each of them, as I sort of introduce you, just to maybe spend a couple of minutes sharing with the audience your path, right? Not what's on, it's what's not on the resume, right? That really got you to where you are today. What has stood out, differentiated you? What has really been that path behind the CV and the resume? But let me begin with Phillip Hahn to my immediate left, who is a partner at Goldman Sachs. Phillip's been at Goldman since 2008, made partner last year. He is the global head of quantitative service sales and head of clearing sales for the Americas. Responsible for a significant business. But Phillip, let's start with you, and then I'll go down the line. But tell us a little bit about your pathway, and what was your journey like that got you to where you are today as partner at Goldman?
Sure. First, thanks you all for being here. Obviously excited to be back and supporting the AABDC and John in particular, particularly on this 20th year anniversary. I think for me, I think you've heard this before, everyone needs a little bit of luck, and some people say that's preparation meeting opportunity. I joined Goldman Sachs on September 8th, 2008 from Lehman Brothers. I was a week away from the bankruptcy, and so that was the luck I needed. And it was, and I survived that. And I learned, I think everyone in this room would attest to, a lot more in the crises, be it the financial crisis, the pandemic, and other things kind of in those periods than in the lower volatility times. So I think to briefly answer the question, I would say, my path was really one focused on cultivating relationships, my network within my industry, which is the hedge fund industry, building my foundation of knowledge and continue to be intellectually curious. And then, and we'll talk more about this today, addressing blind spots, addressing things that were holding me back internally, and you don't compartmentalize these things, and at home, and those other aspects of my life.
Terrific, thank you, Phillip. Let's head over to Jim Lee. Jim's the Senior Vice President, Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at Pepsico, Beverages North America, which is their largest operating division, as I understand it, over $20 billion in net revenue. So Jim, tell us about sort of your path, your journey that took you to where you are today.
So first, thank you, John, for all your leadership and sponsorship. I'll take a slightly different path. I mean, I've been at PepsiCo for 23 years, and I would say my career, when I reflect on it, it's a little bit of, as Phillip says, a little bit of luck and circumstance. Typically, similar to what Andrew said, a lot of us are pretty similar in our upbringings, our focus. I was prototypical. I was great at math. I studied hard, didn't say a word, just kept working and grinding. And candidly, I just got lucky. I got sponsors who sort of picked me out and said, hey, Jim could be good at this, and they started sending me to different roles, and before I knew it, I had the opportunity to get into bigger and bigger roles in the company. For every one of me, there's hundreds of super talented Asian Americans that struggle to move ahead and get to the senior ranks of the organization. A lot of it's because of luck. A lot of it's just circumstance. And so that's one of the pieces that I think we need to talk about as a community beyond that, and how do we empower our future generations to think about the characteristics that'll make a leader. Because I think Andrew and a few others had said it before, is, my upbringing, I'm lucky where I grew up, and I grew up in America, but those things are not going to be what are going to take us and propel our cohort into future leadership. We need to support each other. We need to start developing new talents and new focus areas. But I would tell you, my journey is no different than many people out there.
Thank you, Jim. And delighted to introduce Sarah Choi, Assistant General Counsel at New York Life Insurance Company. Sarah is responsible for the Asian Pacific Circle Employee Resource Group at the company. Her practice specifically focuses on tax, all different aspects of tax, as I understand it. That's federal, state, local, transitional, and product tax areas. So Sarah, tell us about your path and your journey.
Sure. Well, so growing up, I grew up with my parents, my grandmother, and a brother. So my parents and grandmother were first-generation immigrants. I assume like many of others, I was told to be a doctor or a lawyer from my parents. But my grandmother was like, no, don't go to school too much. You're not going to get married. So I did go to law school, and then I went to school again. I got a master's in tax law after that, so I did not listen to my grandmother. But yeah, here I am. I've been at my current company for over 6 years now, and co-chair of the APC. And I agree that it's a mixture of luck and circumstances and skill, but I think that building my network was hugely, hugely beneficial, and just having other Asian American mentors and sponsors just helped support me throughout my journey.
Terrific. Thank you for sharing so openly and candidly. For those of you that may be intrigued, I'm a first-generation immigrant that was born and raised in England. My parents arrived in the UK about 3 months after they got married from India, arrived by ship. And I was born at a hospital in the East End of London. We were one of 3 immigrant families in our entire sort of neighborhood. And so I grew up in a very typical first-generation immigrant household, very conservative. Indian parents, couldn't wear short-sleeve dresses, no nail polish, wasn't allowed to date boys. Everything was, work hard, study hard, get into the best schools. And that was really the foundation that I grew up on. But I think values are an important part of what gets instilled, particularly, across generations. And that's something that has stayed with me on my path and my journey. But let's get to the topic at hand, which is really about the next generation of Asian American leadership. And I think it's important to sort of begin with framing, contextualizing, and maybe defining, this notion of the next generation. So as you draw on your experiences, your insights, how would you define the next generation of Asian American leadership? What are the behaviors, the traits, the characteristics that really define this next generation?
I can go.
Jim.
Here's what I hope, right? I hope that the next generation of Asian American leaders take a lot of the hard work and work ethic approach, but then start to really combine that. And I see that now happening, where you're seeing the next generation of Asian Americans being much bolder, focusing more on things like public speaking. Like, I can tell you candidly, I would never have been on the stage 15 years ago. I would have been petrified to be on the stage and had to work on it. Those types of things are what's going to make a great leader, I think, is the core skill set of hard work and ethics, but also just really building the executive presence, all those things that have hindered Asian Americans from moving up in the ranks, right? And I know everyone's seen the statistics, right? Asian Americans get promoted at half the rate of other cohorts. That's a general statistic, and it happens because of perhaps biases, but I would say your professional appearance, your public speaking, your ability to bring people along. Those aren't the things that typically have been things that we were raised with, right? So certainly for my kids, that's what I'm trying to also instill in them, is a little bit beyond just the core stuff. Don't get me wrong, I have them working hard and playing music and doing the typical things, but I also want them to focus on leadership and collaboration and building those things as well.
Yeah.
I guess I would say from my observations at the firm and at Goldman is the newer arrivals at the analyst and associate level, there are certain skill sets that they have as Asian Americans that frankly the generations before didn't. And so, and I think a lot of those are positive. One is I think there's a sense of a willingness to be an advocate and advocacy that I think did not exist with the generation before. So I think particularly with everything that happened during the pandemic and all of the Asian hate crimes and the continuing of mistreatment of Asians, I thought this was a generation that was remarkably more willing and had more courage to speak up on that topic. It's also clearly the most tech-savvy generation. That's one thing that's very obvious to me as someone who manages a group of these up-and-coming leaders. And the other is, their desires and their fulfillment looks different than, for us. So, one of the things that is very clear is, not only work-life balance, but flexibility. And so, as I think about that next generation, there are certain traits there that are modernizing and helping us evolve, and those are some of the traits.
And just to follow up on your comments, Phil, are those at odds? On the one hand, you have this sort of dominant trait, characteristic of work hard and very high work ethos, right? And then you've got sort of this notion of work-life balance. And talk a little bit about the tension there and how this generation is sort of dealing with that.
Sure, and maybe I'll give a couple examples. So I think the advocacy aspect is really positive because I think the generation before, our generation and anywhere in between and before, there was a lot of education that needed to take place because of the households we were raised in. And so public speaking, executive presence, not only put your head down, get the A's, go to the good schools, but like how do you share that information in a graceful way with the right people so that they adjust and want to bring you up the way Jim has and the way he's described it, and many of us have, right? So that idea, and I think for historically for Asians, is very self-promoting, and it's like, oh, like so taboo, but in reality, it's needed in an American company here in the US. And so I think this generation is better equipped right now coming in at this stage at 22, 23, 25 than the ones before. The work-life balance aspect, I generally think is a positive, and I would say, to your point of the tension, it's changing some of the traditional thinking of the need to be at a certain place. Like right now, we're debating flexible seating arrangements, which is really typical at tech firms where they sign up on an app or something, say I'm going to sit here today and they'll collaborate. And we're debating if someone should have a place where they're going to put their stuff down or they need a locker. But I actually think that's kind of making us better, and there's more of a willingness to look at those things. And I certainly don't think the work quality has suffered. Maybe probably our biggest concern with emerging Asian American, but frankly all young people coming up, is that do you lose that apprenticeship without sitting as close as we're all sitting together, and some of the knowledge that spills out, or some of the ability to sponge in that kind of in-person environment.
Terrific. Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with what was said, and I think the next generation is somewhat maybe more self-aware in certain ways, including in their cultural identity. I have to admit, I didn't really think that deeply about my Asian American identity until I was somewhat older, but I do think with the current events and everything going on that they are more aware, and again, with advocacy and things like that, I do think that they're better equipped to help support the Asian American culture and the next generation as a whole.
What is it that you feel they will most need to be successful? Given the backdrop that I described, given the sort of changing outlook and the way the next generation is interacting with the workplace, what will they most need to be successful?
I think development opportunities and visibility. So I think visibility is something that they can also work towards and try to grab those opportunities, but also for us and older generations to help provide those types of opportunities as well.
And how do you all think about sort of the transfer of knowledge? I mean, I think about, for example, I came to the United States at the age of 18. I had sort of this immigrant upbringing in England, went to university in New York, started my first job. There was no playbook. My parents weren't here to tell me, how do you present in your first meeting? How do you show up on your first day at Merrill Lynch, in an investment bank? What are the do's and don'ts and the protocols, right? There is no playbook for us. So how do we transfer this knowledge around, here's what it takes to be successful? Here are the rules of the road, if you will.
I mean, I think a big part of how that works well is what Sarah's doing, and I'm sure at Pepsi and at Goldman Sachs is the Asian network or the Asian Professionals Network. I mean, those networks are there to really help people with exactly what you described, because there isn't a class or a textbook or a way, and it's navigating something really different. And we do it, I think, with a lot of enthusiasm and passion, and with mixed success in reality. But it's not, it's something that people can have the opportunity, whether it's in our case, presentation boot camp or another firm, other ways to help people navigate. And because to me, it comes down a lot with communication and their ability to communicate the right way with the right people at the right time. And that can drive a lot of the outcomes that we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean,
Jim?
to build upon that as well, I think it's a lot of this is also just, it's visibility, it's awareness, it's advocacy, it's just supporting each other through ERGs or whatnot. I think that's critically important. I think also, you also want to have sort of a North Star or role models to aspire to, right? And I think, for instance, Andrew Yang is a great example. He created an environment where people now can aspire to do that, right? So the more we can build leaders in the Asian community and build each other up. I mean, the Asian community is not great about building each other up. Our community is more about who can be better than the next person, who can be better than your neighbor or your, it's too competitive. It should be focused on building each other up. Therefore, we give better examples for people to aspire to. And then future leaders can see what are the qualifications. Hey, I need to work on these types of things. But I agree broadly on the advocacy as well.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback off of that, when I first started at New York Life, there was an Asian American leader who was senior, and he later became president of New York Life, which is a Fortune 100 company. And until I saw him in that role at my company, I didn't realize how much I had needed to see that. And he was just such a source of inspiration for me. Like, even when he's retired and no longer there, like, I think about that and I was like, yes, that was representation at like a large company that I could aspire to. So.
Yeah, that's such an important point, the importance of role models, right? Being able to have leaders, and Asian leaders in particular, that you can look up to and aspire to move into roles like the ones that they've held or that they hold. Let me sort of segue a little bit to each of your organizations and how you've witnessed and seen the rise of Asian Americans within the walls of your organization. Talk to us a little bit about sort of what some of those pathways have been like. What does the rise of Asian leadership look like in the context of the companies where you currently work? Sarah, let's start with you.
Sure. So I was mentioning our former president who was Asian American, and I think just having him in that role, he helped support other Asian Americans to bring them up with him, and that was just really great to see. And we do have a good number of senior Asian Americans in our company, and yeah, it's just very aspirational. I'm lucky to work at a place where there are Asian Americans in those roles. Yeah.
And are they across a broad spectrum of roles, frontline, revenue producing roles, in addition to corporate functions? Is there a diversity of the leadership roles that they hold?
I haven't seen the numbers, but I would guess that there might be some disparities in certain areas. I do think that historically Asian Americans have been more, there's probably been more Asian Americans in certain areas, I would say like finance or that type of thing. So it may be different, I'm not sure.
Terrific. Jim, Pepsico, what's it like there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, we had a terrific run of a lot of senior leaders and our CEOs and C-suite leaders who have been Asian American. So we have a strong success record. I think two things. One is, I think we all shared this before, is like it's not a problem of attracting talent. It's always a problem, it's a challenge of elevating the talent, right? And so when you look at the numbers, statistically, everything seems okay. The representation in PepsiCo's executive workforce is similar to, of Asian Americans is similar to the global or overall workforce, but it's pear-shaped. The leadership ranks are certainly slimmed down. So that's one. The other thing, at least the awareness part, and I have some of my colleagues here, Raj, who is, if you raise your hand, Raj, I don't know if you're around. If you're, yeah, there you go. Bringing in passionate leaders to lead the ERG. I'm the executive sponsor, but Raj is the North American president for the ERG, and I can tell you, him and Jane, I think, is there as well, and a few others, like, you need people passionate to drive the cause so you can raise awareness, and obviously what happened the last couple of years, it's so critical to do that, to build this and to build the right forum for others within PepsiCo and make sure we're actually focusing on the right issues as well.
And I'm going to be a little provocative here because you're, in a way, a company that's a really good test case. So you had an Asian CEO for many, many years, Asians in very senior prominent positions. Did that help accelerate the rise of Asians within PepsiCo?
So Indra Nui was our CEO for 10 years, and she was fantastic as a leader. It certainly helped. It certainly helped a lot. What was the one challenge has been underlying a lot of that is we bring in the right talent externally, and that's what we've done, and to raise them at senior levels. What we haven't done enough is raising people from entry level or professional level ranks and moving up the organization. That's been the challenge. So it has been a challenge. It's been great to attract Asian American leaders into PepsiCo, but for people to want to stay longer and become leaders through and stick it out like I have for 23 years, we need more of that. So certainly it's been a catalyst.
Terrific. And Phil, Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs, culturally, one of the most competitive firms to get into. You compete very fiercely to join the company, and then I think tremendous pressures, obviously, in terms of the ability to rise. Goldman is one of the companies that has an annual review of employees, and you're known for purging the bottom X% every year and cultivating talent and so on. So what's it like inside the walls of Goldman Sachs to rise for Asians?
Sure, that's quite an intro for Goldman Sachs. It's all true, no. Look, I feel that, and I think someone used the school example, and it's definitely aligns with what Jim said, which is just that the work people do to get to Goldman Sachs, we don't have an issue of recruiting 20 to 25% of our entry-level people that are Asian or Asian American. And I think we feel quite proud of that, and we should. And we suffer from the same issue that as you move up in the organization, we actually only have five titles at Goldman Sachs: analyst, associate, vice president, managing director, and partner. That as in particular, not surprisingly, unfortunately, you get to the managing director and partner level, that percentage roughly halves. And so our issue is not a recruiting issue, as has been talked about here. Ours is, as you've talked about, how do we get those people in the right positions to succeed? How do we sponsor them or mentor them to get, or both, and get them to that place and give them a chance at success? And there's more work to do, is the reality of it. I think I know there's a few Goldman Sachs people here in the audience, but I would say, the highest level of management of the firm is either that you sit on the management committee itself or you're a partner at the firm. And there's a lot of work to do in both. I think if the management committee is public, you could go look, you'd say, and this goes a little bit to the fragmentation that we've talked about, it's a little bit unfortunate that so many cultures and thousands of years of history and so many countries are all covered under this one umbrella because it is so fragmented. Indian, Southeast Asian, North Asia, and everything in between. It has not been a community, I think, that has shared it all in its affinity to try to help each other. And I think maybe one of the benefits that'll come out of the pandemic is some sustainable effort to do that. But I think for us, we're facing the same goal and drive for that management committee to represent the diversity and complexity of just the Asian community, and certainly I don't think it does today, as well as the partnership. So those are our goals.
Terrific, and thank you for being so candid and just sharing your experiences and talking a little bit about each of your respective companies. I'm going to bridge over for a minute to the audience. We've had some good discussion, covered a range of points. Please feel free to come down the steps. There are mics on either side. We'd love to hear from you if you've got questions, comments, observations that you might like to share or to join into the conversation. feel free to make your way down, and we're happy to bring you into the discussion. I'll pause here for a minute just to see if there's anyone that would like to come and get us started on Q&A. I know this is not a shy group. Okay, I see somebody coming down.
I'm always impressed with the first one.
Walking down the red carpet, everyone's staring. So my question is for all the panel, and it stems from actually one of the comments you made, Phillip, about this next generation being very vocal, very great advocates, and a lot more passionate, and not being shy about it. Sometimes I struggle with that, because sometimes I feel that the next generation are so intense about this, they almost sometimes forget the day job in corporate America. And I've always feel that I am first and foremost doing what my job is, and I happen to be an AAPI leader too. So I would love to ask you guys, what are some ways that you found where you can continue to cultivate that passion and the new ideas, which is exactly what we need, right? But within the confines of what is reality, of what is corporate America right now, and to be smart and strategic about it, so that collectively we can actually achieve a goal. Because energy without focus, and energy without some efficiency from the wisdom that you all learned working in corporate America is not really going to get us to where we need to do. So I'd love to hear how you balance that.
I mean, I'll give one example. I'm sure you both have one as well. There was a couple firsts in the pandemic that I think specifically addresses what your question is, and I think it went a long way. It was the first time, and everyone has some version of a team meeting or a committee meeting wherever you work, and you do that. So I've been at Goldman for 13 years. It was after the pandemic started, it was the first time that in our team meeting, which frankly were mostly Zooms until recently, and it's still a Zoom because not everyone's back, and it's a mix of people in and out, that we actually used the team meeting not to just talk about client relationships and commercial activity and all of that, but we actually set aside time to talk about and really be vulnerable as a manager or leader in front of our team, and to share. I actually co-managed the team with someone who's Black, and he shared his own experiences when he felt it was appropriate. I shared my own experiences around particularly what happened in Atlanta and other times, and around the crimes, particularly in New York, which I think a lot of people saw, and the lack of support and anyone helping. So I actually felt, to your point around the advocacy, and I felt that went a long way. I felt for the young people at the firm, they needed to hear that, wow, you really care about this too. And I don't and they were, I think, comforted, and in some ways felt, okay, it's really good to know that the leader or the manager I work for actually really cares a lot, and that makes me feel better about the place I am, what it represents. And then in some cases, those people wanted to do more, and I pointed them in that direction. It was up to them how far they wanted to take it. But I had never, until the pandemic, actually used that forum to talk more about my own feelings or emotions, or frankly, pain or sadness around these topics. And it was really well received, particularly for the new people.
I mean, one that's a fantastic question. It's actually one I struggle with a lot, of trying to balance, the work you're doing and try to advocate for the Asian American community. I think more and more everything's moving in that direction, and where I'm just going to say the wrong words, probably. How do you make it authentic? Because I think over time, and it's happening clearly right now, is to attract talent and win consumers. You got any company like ours, or anyone or any public or private company, has to figure out how to win consumers, customers, get the best talent. So doing something for the Asian American community should also start weaving into, it's good for the business, it's good for the company, it actually fits together. So the work you're doing and advocating is actually helping the company. So you're not feeling like you're leaving work behind. I think more of the social change that's happening around us, and social focus of the companies as well, is going to actually move us that direction. But I've been in the same position and my colleagues know this, sometimes I'm like, I disappear from the ERG community for like 6 months because I'm too busy on something else. And I think over time that'll adjust over time.
I agree that it's definitely better for the company as a whole. And I do think from a personal level, if that person is feeling uncomfortable or fearful of the events that are going on in their personal or their lives outside of work, they're not going to perform their best at work either. So I think that is something that's helpful when we talk about it. Our ERG had conversations about how are you feeling, especially right after the Atlanta shootings. Are you fearful? Are you sad? Are you upset? Are you all of the above? And it was often a mixture of everything. And at some point when we were talking about going back to work, we are not back at work, but when we talked about it, some people voiced fear about their commute going into the office. And that was something that we raised with our company because, again, if they're not comfortable coming into the office, then are they really going to perform their best at the office? So.
Terrific. Thank you for the question. Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I got a question. So we know at this conference, everyone knows the importance of diversity, importance of like Asian American and Asian representation in corporate America. But how do we convince people who are not so aware about this kind of this issue?
I'm happy to start this one. One of the things that we did, particularly in the aftermath of the onset of the pandemic, was to directly engage at MGM Resorts our CEO and members of our board in listening and having conversations with our diverse audience segments in sort of a safe space. We started with our African American community. We started then with our Hispanic Latinx, with our Asians, and had sort of closed, these were virtual sessions, but they were safe spaces that were created with leadership, with a board member, one or two board members, so that they could hear directly from our employees what was top of mind, what were the experiences, how were they dealing with things like the Asian hate crimes issue or the Black Lives Matters, what were their emotions, what did they feel the company, their employer, needed to do. So I think that's one of the things that you can do, is to get your leadership to listen, to understand, and then based on that, develop an appropriate plan of action or intervention. But others, feel free to share things that you might have experienced.
Within our company, I think part of it is just the unfortunate events of the last couple of years in COVID and all the anti-Asian attacks and so forth. I think it's actually brought the company closer together. So within PepsiCo, like our ERG groups, we have a pretty wide spectrum of them, have really spent a lot of time working together and collaborating. And one of the things we constantly try to focus on is listen to each other. And that's really what it's about. It's just like we start to listen actively to other cohorts that, I mean, candidly for me, I may not have paid attention to a few of them. So anytime you learn, people are receptive to then learn about the Asian American challenge, right? So as we're going through a lot of the AAPI, we did a lot of sessions. Jyoti was on it. We had a few, and I think she's here. You know, we had a few sessions together, and I think those are conversations. I had so many people coming to me afterwards, non-Asian, saying, I didn't realize those types of things. I didn't realize those challenges you had growing up. I didn't realize that Asian Americans had these types of issues. It's just raising awareness, but it has to be two-way, in my view. It has to be collaborative. It can't be us as Asian Americans expecting everyone to learn about it. You have to, I think as a society, we have to learn about others as well. And I think that'll help.
Thank you.
Terrific. Appreciate the questions. Anyone else from the audience? Well, we'll keep going, but feel free to come join the conversation. And all you have to do is come down a few steps and just grab the mic. Again, we'd like this to be interactive and very keen to hear from you and draw you into our conversation. I want to sort of bridge to really some honest dialogue and real dialogue around, you know, what's been hard? What is it that has stood in your way? I'm sure along each of your journeys, you've had roadblocks, you've had barriers, you've had times where there were acute periods of disappointment, where you've been held back. You know, what were some of those moments like? What were some of the barriers that you encountered in your journeys? Sarah, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think I've definitely been in rooms where there's no one that looks like me, or I might be the only female. But I think over time, I just learned to take up space and speak up. But I think it's also the intersection of being both Asian and female and some of the stereotypes that come with that can be a little difficult. But yeah, it's hard to overcome those types of things. Yeah.
For me, actually, like I said in my intro, I think I've been lucky in my career just having the right advocates pushing for me and pushing me in the right way. But I would say a broader statement about Asian Americans in any company, or I'll choose PepsiCo, is against the stereotypes. You sit in a lot of people planning meetings and leadership planning meetings, and it's always the Asian American shows up there like, oh, that person must be really good at analytics. It's almost like chords, like you see in Asian Americans, like strength, analytics. Doesn't mean like they may not be good at it, and it's like, weakness, executive presence, it's almost like, and my colleagues are laughing because they know that this happens, right? So it's just, that's the barrier, and I faced that barrier, but I got lucky because people got close to me and saw me and then moved me in that direction and pushed me. And I had people in my career say, Jim, you will never move higher if you don't get on the stage and make speeches and force your way to do that. And said, I don't care how bad you are the first 20 times you do it, if you don't keep doing that, you're never going to move higher. I had someone pushing me. I had a crazy boss at the time. He was constantly pushing me.
But just to unpack that a little bit more for the audience in terms of practical advice.
Yep.
So how do you really hone in and build that executive presence, gravitas, and overcome the fear of public speaking?
I honestly, I think the best thing is you have to have someone, a couple of leaders or mentors who are actually going to be honest with you and push you. I'm a natural, I'm an extreme introvert. So it's just not my style to want to get on a stage and talk. I just had a guy just forcing me to get on, literally he'd push me on the stage and say, you have 30 minutes, go present. So part of it is you just need someone to constantly remind you to get you out there. And then my company sent me to presentation training and these things. But I think you just have. Great job, man. Yeah, no, I feel, but the strange thing now is I feel so comfortable now, but because I've done it with repetition, it's not a trait that you have that you can't overcome. But everyone goes through those cycles. But if you have someone that's really pushing you and giving you honest feedback to say, do this or focus on that, that's when we all have development needs, development areas and focus. That's great, but you have to have someone really pushing for you. That's really what helps. And I think that's where we can help each other, is push each other as a society.
Yeah. And just building on that, and sort of for our audience, I teach a business communications class annually at NYU Law School. And the important thing that I share with the students is there are very, very few people that are born natural Churchillian orators that have the power of public speaking. It is an acquired, learned skill and capability. And each and every one of you can become phenomenal public speakers. It takes practice. It takes putting yourself in as many different scenarios as you can. Doing a keynote, participating in a panel, facilitating a roundtable, presenting to a senior management committee, and getting outside of your comfort zone. And the last point I'll make on this is preparation. It doesn't matter, whether it's a 5-minute pitch you're doing or it's a 30-minute keynote. Practice and preparation matters and is invaluable. So those are my tips for the day. Phil, back to you on the sort of the question of barriers and challenges. You spoke earlier about blind spots as well. So tell us about sort of your experiences and what's been really hard, and what were some of the barriers that you encountered?
I'd say part of it was something I needed to work on for self-improvement, which I'll certainly happy to share with this group. And the other part was, what I would probably call, unfortunately, which I think exists in a lot of companies here, a bit of an unconscious bias. So maybe I'll start with that first, then I'll move to the first part. The unconscious bias is, if you're a salesperson in the global markets business at Goldman Sachs or an investment banker, you're measured very much on the quality of your relationships with corporates or with clients and the commercial outcomes that come from that. Well, I think, that being successful in that is part of it is being ambitious, aggressive, creative, and figuring out ways to really connect, because ultimately a client is going to choose to do that business with our bank versus another, and that's broadly true in so many of our businesses. And the relational part's important. I felt that it served me well to be that way in the context of my commercial success, but because I was Asian, or in my case biracial, I think people confused with me, with someone, frankly, who, if they were white, would have been applauding that aggressiveness, and I think in my case had this unconscious bias, like it was a bit unnatural, they're unaccustomed to it. And that was something that, I was careful, but I dealt with in reviews, which I would say, this feels to me like something that, someone has a bias and does it, and if I was this person, it would be applauded, and it was something that, I had to work through. And I think that's, to your point, if it is not, unfortunately, in this stereotypic role, I can't code, I can't program, I'm not an engineer, like all these places where I think people expect to see prominent Asian leaders. I'm not in one of those roles, so I think for me, it was very important to push back on that at the right time in my 13 years. The part that was really for myself, and I think this is something really important, and I've been talking about this with some other folks, is, and I think it's great what's happening right now with some really prominent figures in our world are people like Naomi Osaka, which is, I think people lose sight of, I was born in Taiwan, I moved here when I was 9, I have biracial parents, you feel like you have one foot in one door and the other, and that creates a lot of trauma and a lot of dysfunction in what your grandmother said to you and everything else. And I think for me, there were certain behaviors that I had that were not conducive or helpful in my work environment, or my home environment, or my marriage environment, or my friend's environment, that I took time to finally address because I could see it was impeding my career. And that is mental health, that is career counseling, and I just think that I'm so surprised people don't want to talk about this. And now it's especially a problem that people don't want to talk about in an Asian household. But I would say this helps you get ahead. This helps you get better. And so I feel, I was talking, there was a Stop AAPI I Hate essay contest, and I was speaking to, happened to be a high school student who wrote an essay who had a Japanese mother and an American father, and was kind of discouraged from it. And I just said, the earlier the better. It will help you immensely. And so somewhere from 35 to when I was 38, 39, did at least weekly, really kept to it, and it really, I think, changed the direction of my career, but more importantly, my fulfillment and personal happiness. Let's say it wasn't at Goldman Sachs. And so these things, you can't compartmentalize work success and personal success.
Thank you for sharing.
On
Sarah?
that note, I think asking for help is definitely something that Asian Americans don't tend to do, but that we should do. Whether that be Toastmasters to help with public speaking, or getting a counselor, or whatever it may be, or even an executive coach. I think if you can get the help, I think that's always good. Yeah.
Terrific. I'm going to do one last call to the audience for any questions, comments, feedback. Please feel free to make your way down the stage to the mics. Sarah, if I can stay with you for a minute, just to explore this notion of culture versus the company. What are the lines or boundaries, between sort of the notion of home and work, and how does one best integrate what you bring to the forefront in terms of your own true, authentic self and the organization, and sort of reconciling your dominant cultural traits and then how you've got to conform or are expected to conform in the workplace?
Yeah, I think in an ideal workplace, we would all be able to bring our full selves, cultural and otherwise, to the workplace. But I do think that's hard, and that's something that our company as a whole has been really thinking about, given all the events and incidents in the past couple of years. Because I feel on one hand, with the Asian hate crimes, it's been not an opportunity, but it provided a forum for us to provide education and awareness to people who are non-Asians, to be this is what Asians are going through, these are some of the challenges we face. The model minority myth is just a myth. And honestly, there were so many people that reached after and were oh, we didn't realize that there was this model minority myth, or that Asians have some of the largest wealth gaps in the country. So I think it provided this ability for awareness, and that was huge in just allowing our Asian colleagues to express themselves. We've also started this employee spotlight, where we will ask employees not about work, but we'll actually ask our Asian employees about their cultural background. So what foods do you eat at home? What languages do you speak at home? How do you maintain your culture from generation to generation? So in that way, we've been trying to pull those cultural aspects of our employees into the workplace. We'll post it online. We'll send out emails with their interviews. So those are some of the ways we've been integrating culture.
Terrific, thank you. I see we've got a couple of questions. I think one here, and then we'll go to the mic here, please.
Well, thank you again for your time and your insights. My question is, I'm curious what your thoughts are, or your experiences on formal and informal mentoring, how it has gone for you, and perhaps suggestions to the audience. And it's twofold. One is, being in a senior position to be able to mentor somebody and to get promoted within the organization, as well as what you talked about stereotypes of, Asian Americans being, that programmer or coder or IT and ops and, finance, great in accounting. But there are a lot of, colleagues who want to be on the client side, on the business side, right? So we're trying to do that in our organization. I'm a banker, so I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. I'm going to just take the first one, and I would say that both are equally important, formal and informal mentoring efforts. If there are formal mentoring programs in your organization, absolutely sign up and take advantage of it. But I also am a big advocate for the natural organic relationships. And those are the ones that happen because you've worked with somebody on a project, somebody reaches out to you and has seen you, you have exposure to a senior leader that you admire, respect, and you cultivate a relationship with them. I think you've got to be proactive about it. I think you have to carve out time in your schedule to build those mentoring relationships and seek them out and then nurture and develop them. And the last point I'll make, which is really on the topic of sponsorship, the main difference between the two is a sponsor is typically somebody in a dominant position of power that can affect meaningful change on your career or your position. They can advocate with influence, open doors for you. More often than not, sponsors choose you rather than the other way around. Mentoring relationships tend to be much more sort of two-way. But my experience has been, certainly in corporate America, that the sponsors typically choose you. They see you, they like something about you, they're drawn to you, they decide to take you under their wing, and then they become your advocate. But again, in both cases, it is a relationship that's predicated on the investment of a lot of time and cultivating relationships. Feel free to weigh in or take the second part of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said. I feel like maybe the biggest challenge is that I think a lot of the Asian American community hasn't separated the idea, because I work on the sales organization, we have a lot of people I talk to, hasn't separated and very clearly delineated the difference between a mentor, formal, informal, and a sponsor. And in your example, or my example, which is the same example, the sponsor gets the person into this client-facing role, not the mentor. And so knowing how to, the mentor could guide you, but the person who's going to make it happen is who Jyoti described. And I think that's really important to figure out early in the process.
On mentorship, it's interesting. It obviously, everyone says like it's as much as the mentee puts in, and I agree 100% with what Phillip just said, is you also have to understand what you're trying to get out of the mentorship too, right? So when it's definitely, as a mentor to many people, I feel it's so much more effective if I can see them in action, I can give them feedback if that's what they want from me, or I can help them with their career, generally better if I've worked with them before, so I have a sense of that. I do have a lot of people I mentor that people reach out to me. I don't know much about them. I don't have any context, and when they come to me and say, hey, Jim, I want you to mentor me so you can help me get promoted or move, I mean, to me, that's an ineffective way to have a mentor relationship. So you just gotta be very careful where you pick and choose and be mindful of. The difference isn't about how many mentors you have, it's having, my view, it's having one or two mentors or sponsors that really gonna carry you through based on, for any reason, but there's a strength to that mentorship relationship, not just the magnitude of them.
Terrific. Thank you for the question. And I think we're going to go over here.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Great discussion. My name is Chetan. I'm at the Coca-Cola company. The question I have is, we all talked about stereotypes. I got to say that. We've all talked about stereotypes that exist, and I feel like it's amplified a lot during COVID, just with people working from home, and generally Asians being shy and not talking a lot about what they do. What are some of the strategies that you've seen that's actually worked, just being able to work virtually and still build a relationship with different people within the organization?
Can I answer that question since
Yes,
I'm with
Jim.
PepsiCo?
Yeah.
No, it's funny, by the way, just at lunch, we both my Pepsi team and the Coca-Cola team actually sat together at the lunch table not realizing it, apparently, and so we all sat together and had a good conversation. But actually, one of the things I would reflect on that was interesting in this sort of Zoom environment is actually allowed Asian Americans to actually overcome a barrier, which is communication through a computer screen and written Zoom context is a lot easier for a lot of Asian Americans who are much more hesitant. In Canada, we saw that a lot more. I saw a lot more Asian Americans much more vocal on chat, much more vocal because you're not in front of a big meeting room, you're in a screen. It actually helped, to be honest, from what I saw. But I think, but I think those are the broader impacts of the Zoom culture on personal life, personal work-life balance, and all these things, which were much bigger challenges for us.
Terrific question. I think we're going to be winding down now. I don't know where the hour has gone, but I've got to get us back on track and back on time. So closing question, and really sort of briefly, what's your one call to action for members of our audience and for our honorees? And Jim, congratulations to you on being an honoree for 2021. We look forward to hosting and celebrating you tonight, along with many others who are here. But what's your sort of one call to action or piece of advice for the audience on how they can play a role in supporting the next generation of Asian leadership?
I would say be bold in being supportive. Our honorees have so much to offer to the younger generation, so help mentor them, sponsor them, build their professional networks. So I would say be bold in supporting the younger generation.
The same exact thing. So I echo everything Sarah said. It was honestly just be bold, support each other, be visible. As many of you are senior leaders, and and as if you're aspiring senior leaders, just be bold and out there, and just communicate that, be proud, and support each other.
No?
Yeah, very similar. I would slightly just be bold, but it's the same idea. Just take risk and take the time, and everyone knows that time is actually the most finite constraint, not generally anything else. And so be really deliberate with that time, and let that person really know where they stand. That they deserve it, and you're in a position to share that with them, and that's the only thing that can really help them. I think that to me, I rarely turn down, if ever, if someone wants some feedback, and I think I like the example you gave. If there was something that was just didn't go well, or went very well, just write that short email or stop by their desk. I think it makes a huge difference in the development of that person.
And I would just add in closing, advocacy. People need advocacy. They need a voice. They need someone who is building up their hallway brand and reputation. So use your voice, your power and authority to advocate on behalf of others, on behalf of the next generation of Asian leadership. Tell their stories, amplify their stories, showcase their work if you have an opportunity to do that. So those would be my closing comments. I want to ask you all to join me in thanking our panelists, Phil, Jim, Sarah, for just a fantastic conversation. We will all be with you tonight at the gala at Cipriani's. We look forward to celebrating our honorees and the fine work of John Wang and the team, and see you a little bit later. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you everyone. Wow, I think what we have, you guys are certainly the trailblazers, because you guys are the ones that have been left here so far. What an amazing event. Wow. This is my second event, after 18 months due to the COVID-19 situation, and it's great to be back in person. Nonetheless, at a fantastic venue over here at the Asia Society. So thank you to the folks at the Asia Society for providing the space. Also, shows that New York is back as well, showing the resiliency as well. It's good to have a lot of the folks, as well as many of the companies back into New York. Here, I'd like to also congratulate and take a moment to thank John, ABDC and the team. 20 years of great achievement and success, and that also, John, can't do it alone. Also like to thank the supporters as well as the employees and the volunteers at ABDC as well. Give them a hand also. To the wonderful sponsors, right? To all the wonderful sponsors for today, and also the prior sponsors, previous sponsors, existing sponsors for ABDC as well. Without you, our mission and vision would not be possible. So thank you all the sponsors. Also, all the volunteers, contributors, and speakers and panelists here today. All of your wisdom and experience and knowledge, definitely great that you have shared all that in terms of your wisdom. So taking a lot of your time as well and spending some time in providing that information over to us today. So I know some of you all have full-time jobs, personal, as well as being board members in other organizations. So definitely grateful for your time also. Thank you. Today we covered a number of different topics. I'd like to talk about in two segments. One, I'd like to talk about the recap of what we have discussed through the panels. And also, I'd like to take the opportunity here to discuss utilizing our 20th anniversary. We're excited to launch a program, an initiative at AEBDC, and we'd like for all of you to join the journey as well in our next chapter. So 3 panels. We talked about the strategies and insight in increasing the Asian American presence in the boardroom. What a fantastic discussion for those that are in current leadership roles right now to start escalating and elevating yourself into the actual C-level or board level discussion. Great discussions and also insights coming from Mike, Krishnan, and Ida, and many of the speakers. Also, second panel, we talked about the new allyship, right? Asian Americans, Hispanics, Latinas, other organizations and minority groups. Pretty much we're all on the same page. We're all in the same sort of segment and talking about our challenges, right? The roadblocks. But working together as a partner, working together as allyships, co-collaborations are an important segment in what we do, not only in silos, but together. And then finally, the last discussion that we have. Wow, great advice and wisdom, right? Coming from a very diverse set of both industries. We had the entertainment industry. We also had finance, right? We also had manufacturing. A lot of these discussions, right, coming from various speakers like yourself, as well as folks that have these particular leadership type of roles and also have been there, done that. These are the great contributions that you provide advice over to the newer generation. Here are some of the common themes, right, that we actually have heard. One, continue to elevate and cultivate and promote the Asian American heritage, our background. Continue to foster the new generation of Asian American spirit, right? Continue to strive and meet and also elevate these particular goals and inspirations. And hearing from many of you, hearing from the keynote speaker, from Andrew Yang, his background, right, his success, gives us inspiration, right? Certainly, we also have talked about seizing our opportunity as well. Speak up. Strive to be good. Strive to be the best. Ask for help. Ask for mentorship, right? Contribute back, right? Give back. Pay it forward, as a couple of panelists have mentioned. Second, we talked about a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnership, a lot of allyship. Not only from the Asian American community, but we together need to work as a whole, as a group, to find that common vision, to find that common collaboration, right? Working together, if you're in communities, in your ERGs, in your affinity groups. Heck, if you don't have an ERG in your organization, get a couple of folks, start one, right? Work with organizations, work with other communities, contribute back. Number 3, promise and hope. We talked about today, right? And it's a great inspiration to see many of the leaders providing back into their communities. And also, we talked about the newer generation that we're going to prepare, that we're going to cultivate and foster these types of new beginnings, right, in the next 20 years for AEBDC. There's a lot of folks here that want to contribute, right? We were at a dinner yesterday, and some of the awardees were mentioning, how can I contribute back? I would love to provide any help or assistance that I can. I was a 2019 nominee a couple of years ago, and one of the first things that I went over to John and also the group was that I would love to provide contribution, right? As an academic educator, as a startup mentor, as a board advisor for many of these IT management consulting firm startups, they look upon folks that have done it in the past, right? But not only that, the newer generation has a much more drive, entrepreneurial type of spirit. So we as a whole, right, the ones that have done it before, have cultivated, have charted that path, that journey, also need to provide your contribution. But don't be afraid, as we have learned today. There's a lot of people, a lot of folks, such as the ones that are standing already, that our panelists are willing to help. If you don't ask, you're not going to get the questions and the answers, right? So, lastly, I'm happy to announce that in October, in about a month from now, ABDC is going to be launching on the 20th anniversary a special initiative and program called the Young Professional Leadership Program. And I challenge, and if there's a one call to action, I challenge all of you, especially the folks that are quote unquote called younger professionals, and their age is just a number, right? I challenge all of you, we're gonna be choosing about 7 to 10 young professional leaders, right, within your organizations, and feel free to put in all your names in the pool and volunteer. The program is going to be a 1-year initiative where you're going to be working with a lot of think tanks, a lot of research, working with professionals, outstanding awardees, prior awardees, current awardees, future, right, awardees, sponsors, wonderful organizations that John and ABDC have also partnered with. And this is to shape and chart the next journey and path of Asian Americans, right? So more to come in terms of that particular initiative, and I'm glad that we're going to be involved. I challenge all of you, especially the mentors, especially the sponsors, as well as many of the folks and the leaders that we have here today, to continue to contribute your time. For those that are in the younger groups or younger professionals, and I see many of you here, is that the opportunity is endless, right? We heard from many of the speakers and leaders today is that there are opportunities that are out there. Seize them. Take advantage of them. People are willing and eager to help. There are platforms and opportunities and groups that's able to help you and contribute, for you to contribute in. Okay. So with that said, I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited to see all of you. Again, congratulations to ABDC for a wonderful 20 years, and looking forward to the many, many years to come. Also, I'll be bringing back Sapna back in for the final closing remarks. And I understand we also have the gala later today as well. So again, please, if there was one thing, one call to action, learning from this is that we as Asian Americans are very resilient. We're going to be, and I'm very hopeful, in the next years, we're going to have our voice heard, and be seen, right? And looking forward to that journey with all of you. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm just going to give some some extra closing. It's going to be extra closed when we're done here. Eric, thank you so much for that summary. That was excellent. He thanked so many of the people that I was going to thank as well. So again, thank you to all of you for coming, in addition to some of the folks that he mentioned, the presenters, the moderators, the sponsors. I also want to thank John again. And thank you for having me, and also thank you to the rest of his team. There's Maria down here who works so hard to make these events happen, and also Hong Lin, who I just met this time for the first time. He's new to the team. Jing Li I saw today. There's Matt behind the camera somewhere. You probably have seen him at every one of these events. We were joking, it's like a bit of a reunion, and hopefully for all of you too. So thank you, and also thank you to the tech team here at the Asia Society. There's Oscar and Pancho back there somewhere, for getting everyone mic'd up, and a special shout out to Anne Godshall again from the Asia Society. You might have seen her running around making this successful, and again, more importantly, if it wasn't for her, I'd be up here in flip-flops because she let me borrow her shoes that I forgot. So thank you, and extra special thank yous to the Asia Society. And again, we appreciate all of you. Hopefully you can take at least one thing away from one of these panels today that resonated with you. And Eric already summarized. I can summarize the summary since we're closing the closing. The theme that always emerges to me is to speak up, to rise up, and then lift each other up, which is sort of like what everyone, just that's the thing, that to speak up, rise up, and then lift each other up. So that could be a good t-shirt too. Maybe we need like AABDC t-shirts. So yeah, thank you again for coming to the Asian American Business Development Center's Outstanding 50 Asian Americans in Business Awards conference event. Hopefully, that's the last time I'm saying that. Hopefully some of you will make it to the gala tonight, and you can stick around for a short time, I think, to continue networking. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for being here.